When we talk about the prophets of the Bible, Habakkuk often gets labeled as a minor prophet. But let me tell you right from the start, there's nothing minor about Habakkuk's message. This isn't just a story of prophecy. It's a deep, raw conversation between a man and God, filled with questions, doubts, and ultimately, faith. Before we dive into Habakkuk's story, let me share something personal. There have been many times in my life when I've questioned the goodness of God amidst all the pain and suffering in the world. But one particular moment nearly broke me, when my good friend passed away from an epilepsy shock. He had been unwell from a very young age and lived with constant pain for as long as I'd known him. His family gave everything they had to try to save him, but somehow God still took him. I was already grappling with my own diagnosis of an autoimmune disease at the time, and in the face of all this suffering, I found myself questioning how a good God could allow such pain. It was the book of Habakkuk that pulled me back from the brink. This small yet profoundly powerful book showed me that it's okay to question God, to wrestle with Him when life doesn't make sense. It taught me that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about holding on to God even when the answers don't come easily. Habakkuk showed me that doubt and faith can coexist, and that through wrestling with God, we can find a deeper, more resilient trust in Him. Habakkuk lived during a turbulent time, likely around the late 7th century BC, as Babylon rose to power and Judah faced its downfall. His story is unique among the prophets. Instead of delivering a message to the people, Habakkuk records a dialogue, his personal wrestling with God about injustice, suffering, and divine purpose. His questions echo the cries of every human heart that has ever struggled to understand God's plan. This isn't a minor story. This is a bold, honest exploration of faith and doubt. Let's walk through Habakkuk's journey and see how it unfolds. First, we encounter Habakkuk's anguished cry. He opens his book with a lament, a raw, heartfelt plea to God. Let's hear his own words from Habakkuk 1:2-4.
How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen, or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing?
To understand why Habakkuk is so distraught, we need a glimpse of what was happening in his world. Around the late 7th century BC, Judah was caught in the crosshairs of international upheaval. The mighty Assyrian Empire was weakening, giving rise to Babylon, a ruthless and fast-growing power. Babylon's armies were notorious for their brutal tactics, pillaging cities, deporting populations, and crushing any resistance in their path. Meanwhile, inside Judah's own borders, many people had turned away from God, and social injustice was rampant. Corrupt leaders oppressed the poor, violence filled the streets, and the spiritual life of the nation was in decline. Those who tried to remain faithful often felt overwhelmed by the evil around them. Habakkuk, seeing his neighbors suffer, likely witnessed friends or family fall victim to either local corruption or Babylonian aggression. All of this turmoil converged into one anguished question. Why does God allow evil to persist, and why does He seem silent? It's a question that echoes through the ages. Think of our modern crises, wildfires, earthquakes, financial meltdowns. We've all had those "where are you, God" moments. Habakkuk's boldness in bringing his doubts directly to God reminds us that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting enough to ask the tough questions. Just when we expect God to provide comfort, the story takes a surprising turn. God actually answers Habakkuk, but not in the way the prophet expects. Instead of promising a swift end to injustice, he reveals that the Babylonians, a ruthless and impetuous people, will be the instrument of judgment against Judah. Habakkuk 1:5-6 sets the tone.
Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. I am raising up the Babylonians.
Can you imagine how Habakkuk must have felt? He cries out to God about the violence in his land, only to hear that an even more violent empire is on its way. Instead of relief, the situation seems to get worse. This moment in the story highlights how God's ways can be baffling to human understanding. Sometimes he uses unexpected means to fulfill his greater purposes, reminding us that his perspective is far beyond ours. Shocked and confused, Habakkuk doesn't back down. He questions God again, essentially saying, "Wait, aren't you too holy to allow such wickedness?" In Habakkuk 1:12-13, he pours out his confusion.
Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die. Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves?
This is where we see Habakkuk truly wrestling with God. He knows God's character, holy, everlasting, and just, but the events around him seem to contradict that. Have you ever faced a crisis that made you question what you thought you knew about God? Habakkuk reminds us that it's okay to bring these inner conflicts before the Lord. Genuine faith can stand up to honest questions. At this point, we might wonder if God will chastise Habakkuk for questioning him again. But instead, God responds once more, this time offering a vision of hope and justice, though not immediate. He tells Habakkuk to write down this vision for others to see.
For the revelation awaits an appointed time. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay.
Habakkuk 2:3. The Babylonians, despite their power, won't escape God's judgment forever. In fact, God pronounces several woes against their greed, oppression, and idolatry. This part of the story underscores a crucial truth. God's justice might not align with our schedule, but it's never absent. Evil may appear to prosper for a while, but ultimately it will be held accountable. With this reassurance, Habakkuk begins a remarkable transformation. In chapter 3, he composes a prayer that reflects both awe and humility. He recalls God's mighty deeds, from parting seas to overthrowing formidable enemies. These memories remind him, and us, of God's unchanging character. We see this shift in Habakkuk 3:2.
Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds. In wrath, remember mercy.
Habakkuk's prayer shows that reflecting on God's past faithfulness can fuel our present faith, even when current circumstances look grim. Now we come to one of the most inspiring moments in Scripture. Despite all he's seen and heard, Habakkuk chooses to rejoice in God, no matter how dire things get. In Habakkuk 3:17-19, he proclaims,
Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no sheep in the pen, yet I will rejoice in the Lord.
This is the climax of Habakkuk's journey, faith that transcends his circumstances. He doesn't pretend that life is rosy. Instead, he anchors his hope in God's unchanging goodness. It's a powerful reminder that real joy isn't the absence of suffering, but the presence of trust in a sovereign God. What can modern life learn from Habakkuk's story? Habakkuk's story echoes into our own lives with lessons that are as relevant now as they were thousands of years ago. It's okay to wrestle with God. Bring your deepest doubts to him. Questions don't scare God, they draw us closer to understanding his heart. God's justice is certain, even when it seems delayed. The world might feel unfair, but we can trust that God sees and will ultimately set things right. Remember God's past faithfulness. When our faith falters, looking back on what God has already done can reignite our trust. Choose joy in uncertainty. Habakkuk's story shows that joy comes from who God is, not from what our situation looks like. Habakkuk's journey from raw lament to confident praise asks us a direct question. Where do we place our trust? When life is confusing or painful, Do we give up, or do we hold on to God? If this exploration has inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more insights and reflections. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. What does Habakkuk's story teach you about maintaining faith during challenging times? Have you ever faced a moment where you almost lost faith in God? How did you find the patience to trust that He would guide you through your doubts and provide the answers you needed? Share your perspective in the comments. Let's continue this conversation and grow together in faith. God bless you all.